Today, I am thrilled because we have two subject matter experts from the insurance industry. I am here with Max and Will from Brown and Brown Insurance. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome and thank you for taking part of this. I'm very excited about having you here so that we can really clear some issues up for board members. So without further ado, I'm going to just jump right into it. And let's start with the basics. What types of insurance policies should a community association have in place?
Well, typically when we're talking about the association's insurance, we're going to be talking about wind, property, the equipment breakdown, flood, GL, directors and officers, crime, and then there's a couple, and then the umbrella, and then there's a couple other policies that is needed as well, like prepaid legal, pollution, and then even the glass policy.
Wow, those are a lot of different names. So how do we determine if our current coverage is adequate for our community specific needs?
Sure. In that situation, for the wind, property, equipment breakdown, and flood, we'd look to your insurance appraisal. We would make sure you have the $1 million policies for your liability, your directors and officers. You had adequate limit for the crime, which is theft of money. Different associations have different umbrella needs, so we discuss that on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, but it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
No.
Sure, I get it. So what's the difference between general liability, property insurance, and directors and officer D&O insurance?
So typically the general liability is going to be for slips and falls, or for example, third-party property damage. Making sure, and then your property policy is going to cover more or less the first-party property. And then your D&O is going to protect your decision makers more or less from any decisions they make on the association's behalf. So, for example, that'd be like the board members and the property managers.
So if they goof up, it doesn't have to end their lives as they know it.
No, yes.
Okay, all right. And in terms of specifics in coverage, what are common gaps in community association insurance coverage that boards can overlook?
Sure, I'll get that one. Ordinance law is something that gets overlooked. It's not included with citizens insurance. Wind-driven rain is often overlooked. That's not included with citizens insurance. Sewer backup. Outdoor property. People think that their outdoor property is covered, but most property policies don't cover the docks or the seawall. And on liability side, people think I've got a liability policy, I'm covered, but they're putting more and more exclusions in there. So they're excluding things like animal, firearms, cross suits, and water damage. So it's important to have the agent look at the policies and say which property is not covered and what exclusions you have, what holes you have in your liability policy.
So do policies typically they cover natural disasters and hurricanes, but what are the limits? You've talked about some of them with the wind-driven rain and all of that. Are there any other important limits that we should be aware of?
Sure. So as far as like flood goes, that's for rising waters. So if the water, anytime we have water that's rising from the ground up, that's your flood policy. Now, if we have a hurricane, we could have rising water and we could have storm damage. So that's your property policy. So you want to make sure that your flood policy is going to cover the envelope of the building and the foundation. And you want your hazard policy to cover from the foundation up, just the envelope of the building. So we look to the insurance appraisals for those limits.
So in terms of, I've heard a lot of terms especially like umbrella policies. What should a board look for in an umbrella insurance policy?
Well, typically in the umbrella policy, you want to make sure that it's an actual true umbrella. You don't want it to be just an excess policy. And also you want to make sure that it sits over and follows form over the GL, the D&O, and also the workers' comp.
How does insurance work for shared amenities, things like pools, gyms, playgrounds, that kind of stuff?
Sure. That's the association's property. So the property appraisal should have all the amenities listed. As insurance agents, we like to visit the property once a year to make sure that we have a reasonably current appraisal and that all of the outdoor property is covered. And as far as on a liability standpoint, it goes by, if there's slips and falls, they go by the number of units, They go by the square footage of the clubhouse. They go by the number of pools, if you have one or two pools. So a lot the hazards are scheduled, and the property is from the property appraisal.
So it's always good to meet with your insurance professional at least once a year, because
Yes.
stuff like that is, I guess it's fluid, you know?
Yes, exactly. Amenities change over time. All of a sudden, they put in a dog park. If we never visited a property and then something happened, that could fall through the cracks when a claim is filed.
A lot of the fear and trepidation and resistance with insurance now has to do with cost, because we all know it's gone nuts. What factors influence the cost of premiums, and how can we reduce them without sacrificing coverage?
The big helper, I guess, or the big thing to look at is going to be the opening protection. I'm looking at things like to see if it's fully impacted or it has the shutters. And then the second big thing is going to be the roofs. If you don't want older roofs, you want to have them keep on. You want roof that's replaced within the last 15 years. That just opens you up to the different carriers, and it can optimally help with price.
Now, roof replacement, that's a great answer, but I ran into this lately. You said something very specific, roof replacement. I've seen all these coatings and products and things that extend the life of a roof, but that's not what you're talking about.
No, no. And see, and that's the thing. At the end of the day, is the roof. They want the roof to be replaced because at the end of the day, they don't want to be holding the bag in case it's a matter of time that the roof is going to be compromised, and nobody wants to insure the product if it has a bad roof or something like that. They want to make sure that it's properly maintained, and I think they're going through the right steps of through the association to make sure everything's well maintained.
I could jump in there too, Lewis. I've had conversations with the underwriters, and their big thing is when the wind comes through, they're doing their wind modeling. Once the wind grabs a hold of that old roof, maybe it's got a great surface on it, but the attachment points are weak. And once it could get to be peeled right off of the top, and they don't want to pay for a new roof when the roof is 20 years old and the attachment points were weak. Sure, it doesn't leak under a normal rainstorm, but the wind is like fingers; it can just rip it right off. So when they do the wind modeling, it models poorly, and we miss a lot of quotes, and also the quotes come in a lot higher as well.
So, are there risk mitigation steps the community can take to qualify for lower premiums?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what we spoke about. Is like the Class A opening protection. That's going to be the big one, and then
Oh,
replacing the roof. Like I said, it opens you up to more carriers and ultimately kind of helps with that price. And then just maintaining the association for making sure that there's no rises in the sidewalks or cracking, and just making sure that the pavement and everything is just well maintained at the end of the day. There's no hazards on the property.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in too. That's why we like to do a prudential meeting 90 days out, not just to take a look at the appraisal that it matches your property needs, but to do a loss control walkthrough to make sure there aren't any slip and fall or other hazards or things that we can point out in advance. If we can nip things in the bud, we avoid claims in the first place. Cleaner loss runs are lower premiums, of course.
we were talking about you visiting a property once a year and kind of getting an update and getting a feel for what's going on, but how often should a board shop around and reevaluate its insurance policies?
Well, in that case, the insurance market's changing every 6 months to every year. So I think it's very important to at least have or at least discuss things with your current agent on what's happening in the insurance market. Go to market, kind of see what's out there, and then have them bring back to you the new options. The insurance broker that at the end of the day is supposed to provide you all the options that are in the market, and then kind of discuss with you to see what the best option for you guys are.
Yeah, also, Lewis, in addition to the pre-renewal meeting, something we like to help out with as well is we do budget projections. Budget season is like August and September of every year. So at least, once a year at budget season, we should be in touch with the association saying, here's the changes that we're seeing in the marketplace. By the way, your appraisal is of a certain age. You might need a new appraisal, giving you a heads up if there's going to be increases or decreases in the following year. And then in addition to that, doing the pre-renewal meeting and getting the feet on the ground and actually looking at the risk and making sure we're properly representing you.
Now, we are in South Florida and it's a little bit of the Wild West here. So what are some potential liabilities for board members, and how does D&O insurance protect them?
So on this one is you're going to look at, we'll be mainly concerned with like the vendor contracts, and that's something that one that's we're going to help you mitigate with like reviewing all your certs and the vendors to make sure that they're properly they have the proper insurance. And then the other part is decisions made on the board. It's any decision that the board makes can have a net that has a negative effect, can come back to the board. So for example, if the board's trying to help with the insurance costs and they're not maintaining the proper limits, but they're trying to do the best they can to mitigate the cost. At the end of the day, if they were to have a claim that went above what they purchased, the association is liable to come back to the board for not maintaining the proper limits, not maintaining the proper limits. And ironically, that's actually one of the big exclusions in the D&O policy is failure to maintain proper limits is not covered. So this is a whole nother rabbit hole.
So without going too far down that rabbit hole, what you're saying is presumably if a board member director failed to do these key maintenance items on their property, they could be personally liable for not taking care of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Now,
So you would have that director's and officer's policy.
So that D&O policy is big.
yeah, I can see where I'd want it. Wow. Okay. So how does insurance handle legal disputes or claims made against the board or the community?
Sure, I can handle that one. So on your general liability policy, most of the times if we're having a suit on the general liability policy, it's going to be for like third-party property damage. And what's very common in South Florida is we're going to have a water damage claim. The association's property policy is going to cover from the drywall out, from the paint in, the homeowner's policy is going to pay. They come back 6 months or a year later and they say, you know what? I think the association was negligent. I'm going to subrogate. I'm going to sue the association for the claim I just paid on the homeowner. So in that kind of situation, you want to get that subrogation suit to us so we can file the new claim for you. Directors and officers is going to respond for the defense, like Max said. If you're making decisions and later on someone files a suit, you bring us that suit against the board member, the property manager. That will go to your directors and officers policy. And then from time to time, we have a prepaid legal policy, and people say, why do we need to have the prepaid legal policy? Unfortunately, South Florida is very litigious. We get a lot of suits that don't have merit. So if something doesn't have merit, it can be declined from the liability policy, declined from the directors and officers policy. Now you got to defend yourself on this frivolous suit. But if you have the prepaid legal policy, once they're declined, we tender it to the prepaid legal policy, and you have unlimited defense. So if you have subrogation efforts or suits against the board members, get them with your agent and they'll see which policy will respond.
What happens if a vendor working on the property causes damage or an injury? Who's liable?
So that's why we wanted to go ahead. That's why we're gonna vet all the vendors. So we're gonna check their certificates and make sure that they have the proper insurance. Because if they make a mistake, we're gonna put the claim through their insurance at the end of the day. And we only want to use vendors that have insurance and that are properly insured.
Got it. Now, you mentioned a word that's a great segue, claims. What steps should the board follow when filing an insurance claim?
We always request that only the property manager would file the claims. If it's a self-managed association, only the president would file the claims. And we'd ask they would please check with the agent because we'd like to go over the situation with you. We see, okay, if it's a legitimate claim that needs to go to one of the policies, so be it. But many times we're going to get calls and it was something that happened with somebody's car or something that just happened in somebody's unit with their homeowner's property exclusively. Those claims would be needed tendered to the auto policy or the homeowner's policy. So we want to speak with either the property manager or the president to make sure the right policy gets notified.
How can the board make sure that there's a smooth claims process and avoid the typical pitfalls? Are there any best practices aside from what you've mentioned already?
Well, the association and the adjusters, they want to communicate directly with us. And that's kind of be the thing is it's our job to go ahead and facilitate it from there on. and then we're going to relay the information that we get. And I think that's the best way to more or less facilitate the process and make it easier on the association is let us take that off your hands and we'll relay the information that we're getting back from the carriers and go forward from there.
Is there a timeline for claims resolution, and what should a board expect during that period?
Your property claims are your fastest ones. We can see those resolved in a couple of weeks for a small water damage claim. Obviously, if it's a very large water damage claim going down many floors in a vertical building, it will take a little bit longer, but property damage is a pretty quickly adjusted claim. General liability claims, if it's a third party subrogation suit, those get handled pretty quickly. But if we have a bodily injury claim and somebody got seriously injured, that could take 6 months, a year, or a year and a half. Any kind of bodily injury claim takes time. And your directors and officers claim is kind of a strange animal. If it's one of those frivolous suits and we get it to the directors and officers adjuster and right away they send a letter and the attorney backs off, it could be immediately resolved. And on the other hand, if it's one that they're going to fight tooth and nail, that can go on for 6 months to a year and a half or longer.
Wow. That sounds like an ordeal.
They can't be with the directors and officers, and it's personal too sometimes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So really having good communication, a good relationship with your insurance person is the difference between an ordeal and a process.
That's what we're here
Well, see,
for.
and that's the big thing at the end of the day is there's two types of brokers out there. You have a transactional broker, then you have your risk management broker, and that's kind of where we try to fit into the box. Is we want to be your risk management broker. We want to grow with you guys, and we want to make sure there's no gaps in coverage at the end of the day, as well as making sure that you're getting the best price.
Now, I imagine there's special situations that arise. So what should we consider when reviewing insurance for older buildings or infrastructure?
So when you're looking at older buildings, you're going to really want to look at the recertification and the safety inspections, as well as you're going to look at the structural integrity of the building. Make sure that the reserves are up to par, as well as making sure that the wind mitigation inspections are being done every 5 years and that the appraisals are being done every 3 years. And then as well as what we keep going back to is the roof condition inspections, making sure that those roofs are in good condition overall.
What role does the state or local legislation play in shaping our insurance needs? We see a lot that's going on in Tallahassee. It trickles here, there's change, but can you give us a little insight?
Absolutely, that's a great question. We had them influence several $1 billion to the insurance carriers because remember the market was very hard about a year ago. So the agreement was we're going to infuse money, the state's going to infuse money to the carriers to drive down the property rates. And that has happened. We are seeing lower property rates today as a result of that effort. Also, the state said we got these claims adjustment processes are entirely too long. They cut all the claims adjustment processes in half for the carriers. They got rid of the assignment of benefits. And what the assignment of benefits was in the past was the vendor that was coming in to do the reconstruction work on a property claim was also taking care of the billing. So nobody was overseeing the billing. They were submitting very high bills and inflating the claims. So now the claims are being adjusted for the proper expenses because the associations aren't going to pay anything extra. And they reduced the statute of limitations. And we talked earlier about some of the homeowners carriers coming back 6 months or a year and a half later and saying, hey, we think that we paid this property claim, but really it's the association's fault. They weren't maintaining the pipes. If you're coming in 2 years later, people don't have their records. Boards change, property managers change. So they reduced the statute of limitations that these claims need to be filed more close to the date of loss. And lastly, they got some pilot programs out there for mitigation efforts. They're offering associations and owners inspections, and they're giving them some credits and some monies to help them change out the regular glass for impact glass. So they're doing a lot of small things that are slowly adding up, and we're definitely seeing more competition and lower rates as a result of a combination of these things.
Boy, I hope a lot of people hear this because the first out of people's mouth is insurance is only getting worse. So that sounds like a glimmer of hope.
It is definitely getting better. Absolutely, it's getting better.
That's great. Now, going back to our communication issue, how can a board effectively communicate insurance coverage and limitations to homeowners? Never mind the board.
Well, see, that's the thing at the end of the day is we're the experts.
Mhm.
The board shouldn't be the ones for relay. I mean, if they want to, they can, but at the end of the day, they shouldn't be the ones that are relaying the message about the insurance and the limitations and so forth. Let us come out there and do that. We will go ahead and sit in front of the whole association, and we'll go through the what's excluded, what's included, and go through everything that and answer all their questions that they have.
We're happy to do it. We like to do a community meeting for all the owners, and we also bring some light refreshments to make it a little bit of fun
Yeah.
because insurance can be a little bit dry.
No, what we like to say is the association can see us as much or as little as they like,
Hmm.
and and because we know sometimes they don't want to talk insurance all the time, but that's we're here to help.
Well, but this is a really good point, and in South Florida, as I imagine, in a lot of places, there's a lot of know-it-alls. Ask them and they'll tell you. So, so rather than depend on a know-it-all, let's not rely on board members to do your job and
Hmm.
explain this in depth and with the proper perspective. So,
Exactly.
It's our pleasure. Absolutely.
So, what is a board's responsibility in educating residents about personal versus association insurance?
Well, that's another thing is that's another meeting that we come out and do. We come out and do a meeting on everything that the association is responsible for, and then we go ahead and tailor it back to go inside the unit and show what the unit owners are responsible for, and kind of get a good understanding. That way, the association knows what's going on there.
Yeah, and we'll get some examples too. Let's say if there's a windstorm and something comes through the window, what is the association's property? What's the homeowner's property? If somebody slips and falls at various places, when is the association's policy pickup? When is the homeowner's responsible? If there is a loss assessment due to the hurricane deductible, how does that get worked through the insurance and so forth? So we go through different examples for folks.
How can we manage homeowner expectations when it comes to claims and coverage? I talk to board members every day, and they're
Mhm.
just pulling their hair out and going, "We have this claim, but my gosh, the homeowners are just all over me, and I don't know what to tell them."
Well, and that's the thing there is the less people calling you and blowing you up about it, and I don't say that in a negative way, but the less people that's asking questions about it, the better. So that's how we like to facilitate things. So we like to have, for example, make the property manager and the board president on the association side the point of contacts. And then they facilitate it. They facilitate all the questions being asked by the association, and then from there they go ahead and relay that to us. We'll then go ahead and relay that to the carriers, and once we get responses from the carriers and so forth, we'll kind of relay that back to you guys. Would you like to?
Yeah, and also I know Lewis, some claims are easier and they go smoothly, and the worst claims that I get are like the sewer backups because it's dirty water. You know what that is already. So if a homeowner is venting and really going off on a board member, I would always say that I always open my cell because I know there's sometimes when people just need to talk to the agent, and I'm always happy to take those calls because there are sensitive claims that people get really frustrated over, and I'm there to help out.
Outstanding. Will Deere, Max Miller, how can I thank you enough for the work you do to communities, with communities? Thank you very much for taking some time to establish some insights into these important matters. And again, how is the best way to reach out to you?
If you want, you can send us an email. You can give us a call. Whatever's best for the association or you guys personally, and we'll kind of facilitate it towards that.
And we're always open to phone calls. If somebody's like, I really just want to talk to somebody, of course, just give us a call, please.
Now, and then when it comes to reviewing the association, we love to meet face to face. But if the board is a little skeptical or whatever the case is at first, we don't mind doing Zooms or whatever the case you guys are more comfortable with until we leave it up to you guys.
And real quick, Lewis, we appreciate the partnership with you guys. We have nothing but positive things to say with the property management that we work with, and it's a team effort. Like when the property manager calls me, right now it's on do not disturb. I'm in a meeting, but I always take the call or immediately call back, and I get the same response from your property management team. If they're not available, they immediately call me back or they take my calls. If I email and something's urgent, they're always immediately taking care of something. If there's recommendations, they're on top of it. So it's a team effort, and we enjoy working with you guys. Thank you very much for all of your help and support.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And you said the magic word, partnership. We
Mhm.
like, there's people like you who have the backs of our communities. Thank you both in helping boards get it right. And I look forward to working with you again. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Thank you, Louis.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
You as well.